Hey, I'm Maggie. Welcome to aliencherry.studio. It's lovely to have you with me. I have a confession to make. My to-be-built pile is overwhelming me. There are sets in there that I've wanted to build since, well, nearly a decade ago. But for one reason or another, I've not gotten around to it. I do feel weirdly guilty about it, and on self-reflection, I just think that's my subconscious trying to goad me into changing the situation. I really don't like feeling this way, so I'm gonna take my subconscious up on the offer and do something about it. Besides Lego, I love to read. There is a point to this tangent, so please bear with me. Sometimes the almighty algorithm sends me suggestions from the booktube side of the internet. One of the things it suggests is review journaling, where, after reading a book, you write a little review for yourself. You can track various statistics or complete challenges. The end goal is to read more and find out more about yourself as a reader. And of course you can make these things as aesthetic or not as you like. I think this tool might be quite fun and quite useful for Lego, particularly set reviews. For me, I think it'll help with my personal motivation, and let's face it, accountability, in reducing the size of my TBB pile. So let's get one set up. Alright, I've got a simple A4 bullet journal to record my reviews in. I really like the dotted grid to help align. They kind of remind me of Lego studs, so maybe it's appropriate. I've done some pre-planning for this, roughed out where things should go on the pages, so you're likely going to see some pencil marks. I will eventually remove all of those, just bear that in mind. So let's get started with the title page. I'm going to add Lego's unofficial model, or maybe it is the official motto, I'm not sure. Anyway, to this title page, and again this is to remind me this is supposed to be fun and creative. For those of you who don't know, Lego is a portmanteau of the words leg and godt from Danish, which means play well, and it's really appropriate I think to the Lego brand. The next page is going to be my year in bricks page. Well, I guess it's 2 pages. Here I'm going to add a framework or placeholders for all of the stats that I want to track, and we'll fill this in at the end of the year. First up is the total sets that I've built over this year. Then the total minifigures and mini dolls I've put together. And the total number of pieces I've added to my Lego collection. I'm going to give each set I build a rating out of 5 stars, so let's make space for a bar chart which will show how many sets fall into each of those ratings. And I'm going to calculate the average review for good measure. Next, I think it'll be interesting to consider Lego themes. Which themes did I build most? Which themes did I build the least? It'll be worthwhile looking at the age ranges the sets were originally designed for. I'm going to set up a column chart to look at this. I'm going to group the age ranges together. So I have toddler, which is ages 0 to 4, child, ages 5 to 9, tween, ages 10 to 12, teen, ages 13 to 17, and adult, ages 18 and up. For the next, I'm going to track something which honestly kind of scares me, which is the total recommended retail price of the sets. Honestly, I'm not sure I truly want to know how much I've spent on Lego over the years, but we're going to be brave and face it nevertheless. A bit on my methodology here, I will be using the recommended retail price, the RRP at launch, and I'm going to include sets which were gifts as well as the RRP of any gift with purchases. Thinking about piece count is really interesting to me as well, so let's track the smallest and the largest sets I built, as well as the average piece count. In the Lego community, price per part has become a shorthand way to determine how good a set might be in terms of value for money. It's quite useful as an initial guide and kind of a fun geeky stat, so I'm going to include the average price per part for all of the sets I've built. And finally, for year-end stats, I'm going to look at minifigure and mini doll diversity through a pie chart. I'll be grouping these into 3 kind of broad categories. Classic Lego, that is yellow, human flesh tones, and other for all those multicolored figures out there. That's kind of it for our year-end overview. Of course, I'm going to fill in the numbers at the end. For the next spread, as they're known in the reading journal world, I'd like to do something just for fun. Let's make a bingo page. So in the book world, this is usually filled with things like different genres or stories featuring a certain type of character, a trope, and when you read a book which has that characteristic, you get to stamp it on your book bingo. I think we can do something quite similar with Lego. But for this, I'm actually at the moment only going to include the framework or layout right now. I have a few ideas for the squares, things like contains a Lego frog, has a new color, is under 100 pieces, is over 1,000 pieces, things like that. But as I kind of know what sets I have, it would be really easy for me to make a bingo card I couldn't possibly lose. So I would really love your ideas to help me fill out this grid. If you could, please leave your suggestions in the comments. I'll save them all up for that year-end completion. Now, what's a year-end without some awards? I want to know what my top 10 sets are and my top 10 minifigures are. This is probably going to be by just how much I enjoy them. And it would be good to leave some space for other favourite things like cool pieces, things like that. There are lots of ways to determine what is best. One of those typical ways you might see is like a knockout style tournament, and it works really great for sports, but it might not be so good for determining a general favourite. It does run the risk of one side being stacked, and it also means you don't really get a chance to compare everything against everything else. So I'm going to use a different method. I'm going to use the head-to-head prioritization matrix. Sounds very fancy. First, you create a staggered grid. I'm going to use the letters A to J to represent, 1 to 10, and I'll assign sets to each letter later. Then you compare that first thing to the second thing, head to head, and whichever wins, you write it in the column. For example, if I compared A and B was the winner, I would put B in the box. Then I would compare A and C, and if A was the winner, I would write an A. Then compare B to C, and so on and so forth, just always comparing the item in the column with the rows. At the end, for each column, you tally the number of times that letter appears in the grid. And then you automatically get a ranking generated from your highest to lowest count. Now you might be wondering, but Maggie, what happens if there's a tie? Well, in those cases, just refer to your head-to-head ranking to determine which one was higher than the other in that case. So I'm going to try this method for both sets and minifigures to rank my top 10. Finally, we get to the set review spreads. I'm going to start by defining my star ratings, which will be something to help me keep consistent. A full 5 stars mean the set is that total package, great build, great aesthetics, great play features, or great for display. 4 stars will be just so close, it might just be lacking a little in one of the above areas or a little bit across all. 3 stars, perfectly adequate, or a cromulent set. This is a bit of a running gag in my household. This comes from a podcast my husband listens to called DLC. It's really great if you like video games. 2 stars means it had potential, but for me, something was wasted. 1 star, quite lackluster, although admit it could be useful for parts. And then 0 stars, just shouldn't have bothered. I'm going to also give each of these sets kind of I'm going to call it a BAP score. Where I live in the UK, a BAP is kind of just like a bread roll. I don't know why, it's just stuck in my head and I thought it would quite be fun. But it stands for build, aesthetics, and play or display features. And finally, I'm going to add in an index in case I need to find a set quickly and to help keep track of what I have completed already. Now, for the reviews themselves, I'm going to do something a little fancy, a little extra, just because I'm going to cut down the page into a smaller space. And again, there's no real reason for this, I'm just doing it for the vibes. Although, admittedly, I am a little concerned about the structural integrity of the book by doing this, so we'll have to see how this holds up over time. That's a problem for future Maggie to deal with. Now, for my reviews, I'm going to collect the following information: the set ID number, the set name, the theme, the date of release, the recommended retail price, how I acquired that, so was it a gift or a gift with purchase, was it something planned or an impulse buy, or is it a historic set and I honestly can't remember. I'm also making space for the number of pieces and my personal plans for this set. I'm going to make 2 small boxes for capturing what I love and what I dislike about the set, and a larger box for a kind of 1-sentence review. There's a space for my BAP scores out of 5, and finally the washi tape is where I'll fill in that final star rating. I'm going to make good on this motivation I currently have and build and review one of the sets in my backlog and include it as part of this so you kind of see what I'm going for. I'm going to review set 10311, the Orchid from the Botanicals line. Now why am I starting with this set? It's not my oldest set, it's not my newest set. I'm doing it for sentimental reasons. My colleagues gifted me this set. It's an incredibly sweet gesture, and it makes me happy to start off this new journey by remembering the lovely people I previously worked with. So let's talk a little bit about orchids before I start crying. I've always thought of orchids as a tropical plant, difficult to grow outside of really warm and humid environments. And it's true that most types of orchids do grow in the tropics, but they can actually be found natively on every continent except Antarctica. Most orchids are epiphytes, I hope I've said that right, which means they grow on other plants and form a symbiotic relationship with them. They're also notable for typically getting their nutrients and moisture from air and rain, not the soil, which is why they have usually exposed roots. This Lego orchid appears to be based off of the moth orchid, botanical name, oh my goodness, Phalaenopsis. Sure, let's go with that, which is native to tropical and subtropical parts of Asia. It may be so named as the flower shape kind of looks a little bit like a moth in flight. Phalaenopsis derives from the Greek words for moth-like. There are about 70 species within that whole type. Now, according to the Royal Horticultural Society, as a houseplant, moth orchids flower for multiple months at a time, all year round, and it's comfortable enough at room temperature, provided it's potted in moist bark-based soil. They're pretty hardy for an orchid, which makes them one of the most popular types to grow at home. There's a lot of symbology attached to flowers, and orchids are no exception. Quite the opposite. I found so many meanings associated with orchids based on the type and the culture being referenced. However, there were some common themes that emerged, such as admiration and respect, gratitude and support. And white orchids such as these often represent purity and innocence, but also hope or new beginnings. As such, moth orchids make a great present, and I have to think that maybe this was gifted to me with those lovely thoughts in mind. Now, as far as the Lego build itself goes, I found the pot actually really interesting. There's some great techniques in there. It is very repetitive, but I found myself getting into kind of a mindfulness state whilst building it, and it actually made the time go really fast, and it was really calming and soothing. Unfortunately, I have to contrast that with the branches of this build. I definitely didn't find myself getting into that same state. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is the repetition happens in really short spurts, so it was really hard to get into that flow state. The second bit is I had a lot of trouble deciphering the appropriate alignments from the instructions so that it wouldn't clash when I went to put it into the rest of the build. And that meant I really felt that repetitiveness in those sections. One thing the Botanicals range is kind of known for is something called nice part usage, or NPU. And these orchid flowers, the blooms, are absolutely no exception. They were a lot of fun to build. I particularly like the Lego frogs acting as the, I think it's the cap of the flower. The botany is not my forte. I much prefer to enjoy the beauty and fragrance of flowers than to study them. Set 10311, the Orchid, from the Botanicals line, was released on the 1st of May 2022. The recommended retail price is £44.99. I received this as a gift. It contains 608 pieces, and I will be displaying this in my home. I really enjoy the nice parts usage in this set, but found parts of it to be quite repetitive. For this reason, I would rate the set's build as a 3 and the aesthetics and display values at 5. For me, this set boils down to a lovely display piece with a bit of a repetitive build. Overall, I'll be scoring it a 4 out of 5. Thank you for sticking with me to the end of the video. I appreciate this was a bit of an unusual Lego review build, and not just because it's for a set that came out in 2022, but hopefully you found it inspiring. Please let me know if you plan to apply this journal technique to your own Lego collection, and do leave your suggestions in the comments for that book bingo. I am really looking forward to filling it in at the end of the year and sharing the results with you. Do please subscribe so you don't miss out. Have yourself a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.